Welcome to another Say It Loud podcast. I'm your host, Matt Jones. Thank you for joining us. We had Rick Steinberg on the show this week, and I joked at the beginning that I was going to learn a lot from him. You know, it was his first podcast ever, and he's not really an experienced podcast guy, listening to them or being on them, so it was really fun. Felt privileged that he came onto the Say It Loud podcast and taught us so much. He's a blues musician and a painter, kind of a mixed media visual artist in Austin. He's been in Texas for over 30 years. And what did we learn? I learned that playing the blues is honest. It's raw. It's elemental. I learned that if a first grader likes a song, it's a good song. It's as basic as that. That might be one of my favorite quotes I've ever heard. And lastly, we might have learned that Rick Steinberg is, in fact, one Tony Staccato. Who knows? Maybe. Maybe it's his alter ego. Maybe he used to be. Who knows? The jury's still out. But I really enjoyed this podcast. Rick can wax poetic about everything. He's had a wealth of experience. And I think it's been one of the most open and honest podcasts we've had so far with a guest. So enjoy. Say it loud. Rick Steinberg. Check him out at artworksricksteinberg.com for his paintings. And check him out as Stonehouse. Plays all over town. And he is a badass.
All right, yeah, nice. Hey,
Hey, let's do this.
Let's.
So we've got another Fair City Fire Say It Loud podcast with a brand new guest. Rick Steinberg is here today. Super psyched. Actually, Rick, when you came in today, you were saying, "No, what's a podcast again?" Or how can my wife find it? So we're really happy for you to take the chance with us on your first podcast, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And I've just revealed that I'm not 19.
You're not?
No.
Oh, my goodness.
The only 19-year-old that doesn't know what a podcast is.
Yeah. That's funny because we played a show this past weekend with some probably 19, 20, 21-year-olds.
Yeah, they had to be just mid-college.
It was interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. At that gig, yeah.
We felt like, we should have brought our walkers in.
We felt old as
damn kids.
Almost 15 years older than some of these people. It's crazy.
Yeah, Rick, when was the last time you took your shirt off at a show when you were playing?
Legitimate question.
Oh, that's a good question. Probably when I was in college.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, Rick, we're happy to have you here. Local musician, visual artist, or a painter. We can get into that, the idea of how you identify yourself. We've got Brett here, Brian, and I'm Matt. One of the first things I thought when I first saw you was I can learn a lot from you. I don't know, I like you. I can't tell if you're intimidating or if you're going to, I feel like if I'm going to say the wrong thing.
Only if you're dating one of my daughters.
Okay,
Yeah.
And it's really not by choice. It's just I've been told that I'm intimidating.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Don't worry, Rick. I don't date anybody's daughters.
That's good.
There's nothing sad about that.
Yeah. But I was thinking, okay, so you're a musician and an artist, but the word artist or art is confusing sometimes because we use that for musicians as well. So do you self-identify as anything? Do you describe yourself as a visual artist and a musician? Do you say you're an all-around creative person or artist? Do you even consider it at all?
Oh, yeah. Well, I do consider it a lot, I think, really, just because, the visual arts and the musical arts and really all the arts are so related, and they can be very related. So both of the endeavors really feed into each other. And so, but I do think that I kind of have a sense that I have the identity as an artist where I use my name. And then as a musician now, I use a stage name. So I play under the name Stonehouse.
Right.
Which is a rough translation of my last name. It's just a lot easier for people to remember, and it sounds cooler. And it's important when you're a musician for all that to sound cool. I think when you're an artist, you can be kind of it's a different persona in a way, the visual artist persona. But certainly the process that's involved in creating things, I think no matter what you're creating, whether you're writing a novel or a play or acting or dancing, whatever you do. I think that there's a definite tie of those things in kind of the process of what you do, or at least there is for me.
Just to go back quickly, a little history. You and I think Brian, you've known each other for how long?
I would say probably 4 years, something like
that's
that.
about right.
Because maybe even longer. Because we met when I was working at the Starbucks in your neighborhood, and then you'd come in with the family quite a bit, and then we ended up finding out that you're a musician and all that stuff. So you would come down to the open mic at Firehouse a lot, and we really all got to know each other really well down there, which was awesome.
That was a great time.
Yeah.
And we really enjoyed that Starbucks during that time.
Yeah, nobody could. They didn't let everybody use the bathroom at that point. Yeah, this is back in the day.
That's funny.
Well, it's
a good
it's
point.
definitely out in suburbia, so it was a real treat to meet some really cool people in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
Who
Dan
encouraged me to go downtown.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't know you guys. That's how you met. I thought you met through the music scene.
That's what I
Brian
was-
and
Brian
and Rick. Yeah.
Dan Cohen actually also worked at Starbucks with me, so he was running that open mic at the time. So that's kind of the whole connection.
Was that pre House Wine?
Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
it was. House Wine was going on, but they had different hosts.
Okay.
But yeah, kind of. They pretty much made that transition after Firehouse decided to disband to kind of move things over to House Wine.
Okay.
I think they were doing both for a little bit.
They
maybe.
did.
they
I remember
were.
that's when I
Yeah.
kind of came in to
Yeah.
the scene. It was right around the time I met you,
Yeah.
Brian, and then we met shortly after. I think.
Right.
Because Brian was living with Josh, and then they'd have Klaus house parties. And
Right.
I think that's where you and I initially met.
I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a really great party too.
Yeah, and then we hit it off with our Midwest comparisons or whatever you want to call it. We were both you're from Illinois.
It was just a fun night too because it was the first time that I kind of got to play music with you guys, and it was just I can remember going home thinking that was really fun.
Yeah. Smoking hookah and drinking excessively. That was good.
Did we?
And the garage was not even unbearably hot that night.
No, at that particular night, no, it wasn't.
So
Yeah, another good memory I have from probably at least 3 years ago was doing that show at Stomping Grounds together.
oh yeah, that was definitely a great show for me. That was I really enjoyed that a lot.
That was because we did a few songs with you.
Yeah, you guys did a
We
whole
kind of
song.
backed Rick on a few songs.
That was early.
That was maybe like our third or fourth show, maybe ever.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Way cool.
I remember we did the song "Talk Too Much."
Yeah.
That was really fun.
Fuck, man.
We would do those backup vocals. Rick would say, "Talk too much."
Talk too
And then we come in. It was cool. Good times.
Yeah, song that I wrote for first graders. because they literally were talking so much they were driving me insane. So I just started riffing on that, and then all of a sudden I thought that's actually kind of a fun song.
Yeah.
So I wrote it as if you were more like talking about an adult talking too much, but they always loved it and sang along with it and everything. So it was very fun.
It's easy to trick first grader.
No, I really think if first graders like a song, it's a good song.
Oh yeah.
You're not wrong, man.
What works on first graders also works on drunk people at bars.
Yeah.
Well,
What do you know?
They don't lie too.
They
I mean,
don't.
Yeah, that's
lie.
true. That's
So-
a good point. That's a better
Well,
point.
first graders know all the classic songs. Every song you've ever known, you've learned in first grade.
Yeah.
All the standards.
I mean, you're absolutely right. I coached second graders in soccer for a long time, and that was one thing I learned immediately is like they'll say whatever they want to say. It doesn't matter, and they're brutally honest about it too.
But they hold no malice.
No,
at all,
no,
you know,
yeah, it's
just,
very like,
you know.
yeah, it's very. They don't mean any harm by any of what they're saying. They just say what they want to say, what's on
Yeah.
their mind. Yeah, it's really.
And it's so refreshing.
It is, yeah.
And so, I mean, as an artist, I like to try to have the spirit of a first grader in a way.
yeah.
I'm a responsible first grader.
That's a good quote right there. I like that.
Well, that's what I wonder, because, when I look at people younger than me and a generation below me, I don't know why my immediate instincts is to not be like be a grump or something about that, but it's usually like I'm not immediately accepting of like, I don't know, younger people or the way they talk or act or the music they play. I don't know why it's something in me that is partly asshole-ish, I think. But for you, what made you interested in like playing with like Brian or like guys like this that were like kind of new to town and kind of just starting to explore Austin? Because that's kind of to me personally, it seems like it'd be a jump to like kind of see these guys and be like, yeah, I'll see what they got. I'd love to play with them and be a part of that.
Well, I think from the very first time I heard Brian play, and that was at Firehouse, I think, and you played Summertime Blues, and
that's cool, man.
You know, and I was going, that's all right. That sounds good. So, but for me, I mean, Firehouse was very refreshing because young people are they're interesting. They're not in a rut usually, and they're open to things. Although I think we all, are resistant to, like you said something about hearing new music. We're all resistant to that to a certain extent. And so, as an unknown songwriter, you're constantly trying to sell people on songs they've never heard before. Yeah. And then, I know from my own experience, if I buy an album, it's usually not till the fourth time I hear it that I really start loving it, So that's a trick, yeah, to try to do that. But the thing about Firehouse was just that it was a group of young people that everybody had something going on. They were either students or starting a career or getting a master's degree or working on one project or another. And I just felt like it was a really kind of dynamic group of young people, which really gave me, along with my daughters, people from that age group give me a lot of hope for the future, because I think that there's a lot of good attitudes there that my generation, some of us have a bit of, some of us have less of it, and so I found it to be really refreshing to spend time with younger people. And then like these guys, it was just, it was easy to want to play music with them. Straight ahead rock and roll guys, which is where I came from. Mm-hmm. And, and I hear a lot of the people that I liked when I was young in your music, but yet there's a real contemporary part of it too. And I was thinking about that a lot when I went back and was hearing some stuff that I liked in college from the 70s. And I was thinking that my daughters might not like all the lyrics, because even though it was kind of like the almost post-hippie days, there was, if you listen to the attitudes that the guys have kind of towards the women in the songs, there's a lot of, hey, baby, let me take care of you. And, and so I was thinking...
Mick Jagger. Yeah. He's a good example.
But I really noticed it with the American groups for some reason, the Beatles never really kind of had that attitude. They kind of were pretty quick to make fun of themselves even, So. Yeah. But I thought that was funny when I thought, it's still, the music still sounds good, but I'm getting increasingly uncomfortable with these lyrics. Even though they're not saying anything horrible, Yeah. And then, of course, because I play the blues, there's really a lot worse lyrics as far as how people treat each other. But that's kind of the point of that music in a way. So. And
so you do the quick resume. Yeah, so visual artist, mixed media, painting, musician, slide guitar by the most part. Or that's what I've seen you play a lot, whether it's by yourself or I know in the past you played with the band and a teacher. So that's a strong mix. But to me, you seem definitively Texan. I know I think you said been here about 38.
38 years so, this July 4th. Yes.
That seems like you can say Austinite, at this point.
Well, my grandmother was a Texan too, so I had kind of a connection. She was from Kerr County and lived in San Antonio when she was young. So my father would spend summers during the Depression in San Antonio with his cousins and aunts and uncles and his moms. So there was a connection there with that too that I kind of identified with.
I think it comes across in your spirit, though, in the paintings that I've seen, and the work on your website, and then in the music. You know, I think if I was going to move here and see somebody that was like, what's the feel of Austin and Texas? And I saw that, I'd be like, oh, that's it. I can go home. My vacation's over. I got it all. I got it all at once.
Well, that's my favorite thing that happens when I play is people will come up and say, we came to Austin, we wanted to hear Austin music, and this is it. You know, you gave us what we felt like was going to be Austin music, Texas music kind of thing.
Do you consider that like a Texas blues, or what would you call that?
Well, I think there's definitely a Texas blues flavor to it. I always felt like the Texas blues had a little more swing to it.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of that rhythm really popped. But then when you get into the resonator guitar and playing slide, then it's also got kind of a Delta blues feel to it too, you know, and or a country blues type feel to it.
So for our listeners that might not know as much about blues and the different genres, like how would you describe the difference between Delta blues and Texas blues? You said the swing is there for Texas blues,
for me you know, and Delta blues is, in my mind, you know, a lot of times is more the acoustic slide guitar. It's kind of that can get kind of mixed in with that country blues sound too, you know, and so I think I'm not really a purist enough, probably. I mean, I don't look at the music from a purist standpoint. You know, I look at it from a how does it feel to me thing, and I relate to the roots kind of the roots feel of the Delta blues and the acoustic blues, but I also love the Chicago blues and love all the electric players too, you know. So
yeah.
But playing mainly by myself, the acoustic thing works well. You know, I can drive the whole rhythm by myself. And
was there a reason you kind of dove into that particular genre, or is it kind of a natural feel for you to just fall in line with?
Well, that's a really
blues
interesting
oriented
question.
thing?
I think that, you know, a lot of people that play blues that didn't grow up in that culture, you know, ask yourself that question. For me, it was a Howlin' Wolf record, but the reason I picked up the Howlin' Wolf record is that it said that it had Eric Clapton and a bunch of English guys on it. It was a London Sessions Howlin' Wolf, you know, and so then I played the record and it just hooked on to me, you know. I think it's the feel of it, the honesty of it. It's an elemental kind of music, kind of raw.
Yeah.
So, but it's real interesting how it, you know, you can kind of struggle with that because you can feel like you're kind of a pretender because, you know, you didn't grow up in that culture. You know, grew up in a Midwestern, you know, college town kind of existence, but kind of like Bob Dylan did, you know. I think it's just that maybe because we grew up in such a kind of a conservative place that we were looking for something wild, and the blues definitely fit the bill for that, you know. It was definitely something totally different. It was the kind of music that when I was a kid you'd get to hear 9 seconds of before your parents changed the station.
Really, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that always attracted me to blues, you know, even now is just the rhythm of it. You know, it's like you go to, when I just remember from Firehouse, you'd see all these people desperately pandering, playing the hits, like trying to get people into their music, you know, but all you had to do was go up and play something with a great rhythm and everybody would be up dancing, you know. But that's kind of what the blues is. You got to have that, like, you know, that sort of, you know, constant rhythm
makes
thing.
you move
even with just one player. There's no drums on stage. Sometimes you would have people play with you, but, you know, like most of the time it was just you and maybe somebody singing with you. Sometimes Debbie, but I know she usually had to work in the morning and stuff. But
Yeah.
it's but I remember that you being able to having that ability to get people up and dancing without even like doing anything. You're just playing your music, and they don't know the songs. But
Yeah, right.
They're
But they know
loving
the
it.
rhythm.
They did after a while. After you'd come
Yeah.
back, they'd
Yeah.
start to know the hooks.
Yeah.
and
Well, and I
stuff.
think that the rhythm of it too is, when you get that swing rhythm, it's funny. I used to play when I was teaching. I'd show the kids straight eighth notes, and I'd say, now if I'd swing the eighth notes, it sounds like this. And as soon as you started doing that, they started moving. They just couldn't help it. It's just like this elemental thing, and when you think about it, I mean, it's a rhythm that we hear in things like horses and our heartbeat, da-da-da-da-da-da, and so I think that's one reason why it touches us.
Mm-hmm.
I think you hit on something really good too, as far as, why does a guy from Midwestern Illinois, whose only claim to the blues is that he was born in Chicago.
That's interesting. I've never heard anyone compare it to like heartbeat or horses running.
Yeah, it's like
it makes perfect sense. It's just I've never heard that comparison before. Which is
and
really
even
nice.
if you listen to classical music, it's interesting. Mozart and Beethoven. A lot of times you'll hear horse rhythms in their music.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because they were surrounded by the sound of horses on a everyday basis.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
we're
really cool.
we grew up to the sounds of airplanes and locomotives and engines revving, and so I think the electric guitar really captures that a lot. Kind of that.
Ooh.
Wow.
Ooh. Yeah, that's what Matt said earlier. He's going to learn a lot of stuff tonight.
Yeah.
Well, Rick, you yourself were informed. Your father was a music or an art professor and an expressionist, right? So you grew up in an artistic household.
I did, yeah.
So it was always open to you, the idea of creating and kind of expressing yourself.
Yeah,
in different ways,
definitely. My father was definitely interesting man. He was very conservative in many ways, but his art was very free, and his playfulness about things was, he had that first grade spirit at times. Whenever he was the most relaxed, probably, even just joking around, it could be, he could be very silly, but at the same time, he was very conservative, very, kind of had been in the Navy, grew up in a time, I think, when people kind of had that conservative demeanor in a way, but the one thing that he had that was very different was the art, and then being an abstract expressionist, which of course was a popular style at the time in the early 50s and everything, but definitely learned a ton from him about seeing possibilities, about taking whatever you're working with and seeing what it'll do. And even a lot of times it was just, by necessity, we had to fix something that it broke. And so he would find something that if we took it and bent it a certain way and attached it a certain way, it would repair something.
That's really funny.
So back when
That's very relatable to, I feel like most people's fathers are. I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems that way for me anyways. Like,
well, they didn't have the money to just go out and hire people to fix things,
make it work.
Yeah, and that was he was, they both my mom and dad came up during the Depression, so they definitely had seen some hard times, seen their parents have hard times especially.
That probably informs your financial decisions for the rest of your life. If you go through something like that and have to see all of that happen, I would imagine it's probably hard to be somebody who just throws money around later on, even if you have it, It's
Absolutely,
I can see that.
My wife and I were talking about how both of her mother, who was older, and my grandmother, how they had like a separate pantry where they kind of had canned goods stockpiled so that if there was hard times, they'd have food. And so, and we grew up in the land of plenty where going hungry was never a worry, really, but...
Did you display an interest in the arts early on? I mean, was there support from your father for that, or being an artist was he? No, you need to do something real. Like you need to go work with your hands, and you need to do something different besides, whether it's art or music.
Right. Well, I think for him, the thing about as far as when it got to be college time, he encouraged me to be a teacher because jobs in the arts many times are scarce and don't pay well, and teacher jobs are more it's more steady. It doesn't pay pay the top, but it's steady, and but he did I think that there was a sense of he would do things with me. We would make things together a lot of times. So I think I did learn a lot about making things and the value of making things from him. Although it's funny, when I was a adolescent, I thought I'm never going to learn how to do anything. All I do is fetch tools and hold things still, but you were watching what he was doing, and then when it was your turn, then all of a sudden you had this background that you had kind of taken for granted, and all of a sudden it was valuable. But
what was your father's name?
C. Louis Steinberg.
C. Louis
Steinberg, yeah.
Nice.
Went by Lou.
What was the C?
Charles.
Charles
He
Lewis.
didn't like his first name, so he went by C. Louis Steinberg, which is, my sister and I, because he was very, wanted everything just so, everything neat, and his cars were just like immaculate, and so, we'll joke about, well, I washed my car. It wasn't the official C. Louis Steinberg wash, but it's a little cleaner than it was,
Yeah, that's awesome. Bring out the toothbrush for that, yeah.
Oh, he literally, you could literally eat lunch off the engine of his car.
Really?
It was anybody that bought a car that he had owned was a lucky person.
Did he ever have any, because we were talking before the podcast, we were talking about Mustangs, and was he a muscle car guy, or did he have traditional style?
He was a Mustang guy.
Yeah.
He had a 65, a 67, and a 70.
Wow.
And so it's funny because that obviously influenced me. It's like there's been many Camaros that I've looked at and thought that's a great looking car. I love that car. But when it comes time to buy one, I always tend to get a Mustang. Yeah. It's almost like, you're either a Mustang guy or a Camaro guy. And, it's kind of silly. But it's just, so we grew up with that. And he was really into, that was a really great time for cars because that was when, you had Carroll Shelby and the Shelby cars, the Cobra and things like that. And so we were definitely really tied in with the car enthusiast thing, so that was something that he definitely shared.
When did you start performing? Was it, or did you first start doing music before you started creating art?
No, I studied art, so art is my education. So I started with that, but ever since I saw the Beatles in the early '60s, I'd always wanted to play the guitar, and it took me several attempts to get it to stick. I think I was really pretty well into where you should be an adult before I really got it to stick, where I had the discipline to really work at it.
When you're doing that, when you're kind of figuring out, your music identity and your artistic identity, did you have one that was ahead of the other? Did you use each for different types of outlets? How did you kind of reconcile either your painting visual interests with your musical songwriting interests?
Well, I think I probably took the visual art part kind of for granted because that's what I'd grown up with. So, and that's what my father was most interested in passing on to me, even though he'd played the guitar at one time of his life too. But it was kind of, I think, more the natural rebellion kind of thing that made the music really, it was kind of like, as a teenager, you'd look at the artists that you knew, and they were in a studio working on their art, and the musicians were out there, with girls screaming at them, and they just looked like they were having more fun.
Yeah.
So I think I've vacillated to that, and I think that at this point in my life, I think the passion is pretty equal for both of those things. But I think for many years, the passion was definitely with music.
And when you say that, is it because would your father not have been as pumped for you to be doing music in college or after? I mean, because he was an artist, did he see art as, okay, you can do this, you can teach, you can make income and live steady life. If you do music, that doesn't fit with my idea of kind of a stable life.
Well, I think he definitely had a bias towards doing the art, and I think it took a long time before he realized that how determined I was and how passionate I was about the music, and then he was kind of like, okay, I get it now. But
would he go see you play? I mean, would you tell him?
Yeah,
he would.
He would when he had a chance at different times, and he came and saw us play the summer that he passed away, as a matter of fact, and was really, I think, very enthusiastic about it at that time, So I can remember that being kind of like a thing where I thought, well, that was really nice that he said those nice things to me,
Yeah.
because he wasn't going to have too many more chances to say those things. But I started the art. I'm kind of infringing on your question here a little bit, but I started the art in earnest after he passed. I felt I was about to retire from teaching, and I thought, well, I will do some pieces, kind of to honor him. And it just totally became a thing, And I thought, oh, well, great, now I'm doing this, and I can't talk to him about it.
It's weird how that is kind of a thing. I've thought of that just in general, like the idea of, Brian and I and the guys have been, doing music for, quite some time. And even before we met each other, we've been doing music and had our own success in our own right. And it's like, my father had a heart attack in December, so there was a scare there. He's doing great now, but it was always that thing where it was kind of like if we do, or when we do get successful, it's like, I hope he's around. I hope my parents are around to share that with. And if they're not, that's okay too, because it's just part of life. But, if it does happen after that, the fact of that happening, it's like, oh man, I wish, I hope that was,
I definitely feel that a lot this year. But, I had one night of semi-drunkenness working in my studio, and I think I was talking to the ceiling, like the ceiling was my father. But it was funny, at the end of that evening, I came to the conclusion that I wouldn't have done it if he hadn't have passed, for one thing. Maybe I would have, but I don't know that I would have. And so then I kind of realized, this was his last lesson to me. This was his last gift. He planted that seed, and it took hold. And so I know it's like I know he's with me in spirit and everything. And there still are times, just silly things like, hey, Dad, how did you make a glaze so that it didn't bubble or something like that? Just some kind of,
right.
some technical thing or something, But
did your, 'cause Matt and I were talking about some of the art that you've done. Did I was wondering where the 32 kind of came into play, like your series 32. Was that something to do with your father, or was that totally
not other than the fact that he
it?
liked using numbers sometimes in pieces, and that kind of happened. He was an abstract expressionist, and then in the 60s, pop art came around, which was mostly known from like Andy Warhol type things, where they were putting a lot of there's a lot of influence from advertising,
Campbell's. And all that stuff,
so there was a lot of kind of product names and numbers and different things like that. And so my dad went through a period of time where he was using numbers, and but for me the 32 thing came because I taught 32 years at Spicewood Elementary, which is where I taught. And in that time I taught 15 years I taught visual arts, and 17 years I taught music. So I had collected through that time a lot of play scenery and props and things that I'd made for the kids to use, and so when I was cleaning all that out, I cut up pieces of it and gave them to the kids, and then I took some things home. So I thought I'll take some of these fragments and scraps and see if I can make some things out of it, and then incorporate the numbers into it. And numbers are really interesting because they can really, like a number 3 can look a little like a guitar, and like a guitar that can look like a woman, the form of a woman. So the numbers themselves, there were so many different things you could do with it. It could be the meaning of the numbers, it could be the shape of the numbers. So it could mean a period of time, because I didn't really think of it as being just teaching, but just that 32 years, which was a time where I, had children,
influenced a lot of people.
Got divorced, got married, and
had your children.
Yeah, and having children changes you a lot.
I can imagine, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. You learn a lot.
I don't believe that.
I mean, I can relate to what you said about kind of getting into art more once your dad passed, and kind of taking it more seriously as like just a thing that you really made a huge part of your life. I can relate in that when my brother passed, it was like at that time I really wasn't playing a lot of music. I was kind of focused on school and just other things in life, and kind of put the guitar aside. And I remember just for whatever reason using like songwriting especially, which had never been a big part of my playing. It was always just like I was playing cover songs and stuff, but like songwriting as a tool to kind of get through the loss, and I think in a way to honor him. And I mean, the thing is too, he used to play drums, so it was like we had the music thing in common, so I feel like there was this connection still, and that kind of is a big reason why I got back into music, and I haven't stopped since.
Right.
Because of the writing aspect, I think.
And you're lucky to have that, because I feel very lucky to have the art and the music as a way of kind of, it's almost like part of the grieving process, but then even beyond that, it's kind of part of the living process, where you've, loss is part of life.
Yeah.
When my dad passed, it was unexpected, but and there was a time when he was in the hospital for 48 hours that it didn't seem very merciful, but in the end it did, because he didn't suffer for a long period of time like some people do, and you knew, and he was in his 80s, so you knew it was a natural thing, that natural possibility that he could pass at any time, and so I think you're lucky if you have a way to deal with that.
I think you're right.
And I think the music and the art, particularly probably the art, has helped me a lot.
And I think we're even luckier, and I know you can relate to this because people are enjoying your art very much. Like, you're starting to do all these great. You went to Brooklyn to show your art. Like, that's incredible. Like, I would love to get into that. Yeah, but it's it's that feeling of doing something to kind of get through that, right? That it was a very personal experience, but you put together something, and then I just, for whatever reason, felt the need to go to perform and show people that. And then when I found out that people could connect to it on a pretty deep level, that was what hooked me. into like really, taking the whole thing seriously and like, maybe I've got something here. I don't know. But that was like a crazy feeling that something so personal could be so relatable for other people. And I'm sure, there had to be something there with the art kind of like.
Yeah, well, and I think the music's like that too, and there'll be times when you may not feel like you're making progress, or, you may have gigs where you feel like, nobody's really paying attention, and somebody will come up afterwards and tell you something about what one of the songs meant to them, and you think, gee, that's way more than I thought anybody was paying attention. Yeah. And it is, I think it's just like when you're a teacher. I mean, you don't reach every child that you teach in a deep way, but there's quite a few that you do, and amazingly they'll get back in touch with you. I've had 2 students from way back that have found me this year and both of them related something very personal about their experience when I had them for art that was real interesting. I had no idea that they felt uncomfortable at school, and that their art class was something that helped them to kind of feel more comfortable with themselves. And
wow.
Kind of a release for them.
So you really don't know all the ways that you influence people.
It's amazing how people can just kind of fall into certain roles in their life and not, unexpectedly kind of, like with the art for yourself, like it wasn't something you were, going after or pursuing. It just kind of happened through a process of grieving for you, but just kind of naturally fell in. And how some people are very obviously it's something that you're incredibly good at, regardless if you meant to be that way or not. It just kind of happens to be that way, and that happens. I feel like that happens with certain people. Just whatever it's dance, like whether it's dance or business or hell, just being a toll road guy and just being really good at it. It's just something you just naturally kind of find your way to through certain processes in life. And
it's interesting how people feel the need to express themselves.
Yeah.
I wrote a song on my first CD, and I heard it the other day and really still like it. And it was about a guy that worked at the burger place that I went to when I was teaching it every now and then. And he'd work at the drive-through window, but he was very almost comedic about how he counted out the change when you paid him. And I thought to myself, I love it. I love this guy. I mean, he's got like this crappy job basically, but he's found a way to make it, to personalize it a little bit,
Yeah.
And so, he almost kind of used like funny voices sometimes when he would count out the change, and the little bit of exchange that you have with people in that circumstance, Mm-hmm. And then he was gone, and I even asked about him, and I'd given him a name which was not his name. I called him Matthew in the song, and
nice.
And the first verse was that boredom was the enemy at the drive-in window, so he counted change in an interesting way, but not everybody appreciated it. So. And this is not really what happened to this guy, I don't think. But in my mind, I kind of had it, that maybe he got like the pink slip because he was being too silly about counting the change,
Yeah.
And so it led to kind of a song about, not quite fitting in, and how we can be kind of cruel sometimes to people because I imagine somebody being mean to him about.
Oh, sure.
The way he did that.
It probably did happen.
In a way, too, that kind of relates to, like, how you don't know how you influence people sometimes, like you had mentioned.
Yeah.
Right? That guy was just being himself to a T. Like, obviously, no one coaches you to be like that. No one's like, hey, you should count the change like an asshole out there. Like, nobody tells you to do that.
And
but, like...
25 makes 3.
But here... But here you are, you're talking about him still, and you wrote a song about him.
And I felt bad that I never got a chance to tell him how much I appreciated just that little bit of personality that he put into it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that took
It takes guts.
It takes guts, yeah, and it takes being out, putting yourself out there, and going, I'm going to do this my way, which was, at one point in my career, I was as a sort of a punishment, I was made to stand out in front of the school building with the flag in the morning, which ended up being a great thing for me because.
Well, why did you get punished?
Oh, well,
that's important.
For telling the truth. For telling the truth to unscrupulous people in power. Right. That sounds like like a current day story almost.
Yeah, it does.
School bureaucracy.
Yeah, but it was it worked out great though because it was just a time when things were uptight for the adults, and so I was glad that I was one of the first people from the school that the kids would see. If they happened to cross that crosswalk, I was the first person from school that they saw. And I loved the kids, so it was always, hi, how you doing? And then, of course, you're out there and you're realizing if it's rainy, you're going to have some gear. So I got a big yellow slicker and the knee-high rubber boots, wore my cowboy hat as an umbrella. And I just found a way to make it work. And, of course, I was bound and determined I wasn't going to complain one little bit about it. But the parents all loved it because they thought, here's this guy out in the rain helping our kids get across the street. Really did me a world of good. But the real reason I mention it was the most fun day that I did it was when I had done a thing with my daughter, classical music thing, where people dressed up in wigs and everything. So I had kind of like my Mozart outfit, with the wig, with the wig and everything, and the knee pants. So I had just done that, and it was Mozart's birthday, so I wore that outfit, and with my flag, and the powdered wig, and it was great fun. It's remarkable. Nobody crashed their cars into each other. The parents were just practically, they were just stopping in the middle of the road, rolling down the window. That's fantastic. And I was thinking, well, that's good because some of you guys are probably going off to work at a fairly boring job. So at least I gave you a laugh first thing in the morning.
Yeah, that's great.
So.
Yeah, somebody's probably still mad at that though.
Yeah. Now there'd be some sort of controversy.
Just
about
give me my change.
They're just jealous of my wig. One of the most fun things too was like my daughter, got in touch with me. We're going to do this thing, and there's a lady that's doing wigs. I said, oh, I want a wig, So I went down there with her. So she had a custom made one, and so she was trying. It was like the final fitting. And then I picked out mine was just a, off the shelf wig. Nothing custom about it.
Over the counter wig.
An over the counter wig. The generic Mozart wig.
And Spicewood Springs where you taught, and now your daughter just started teaching there. Is there an element, do you think, because you kind of took, I think, elements of your father, what he was doing, and kind of adapted it for yourself and expressed yourself that way, and now she's taking over kind of her parents. Is there an element of pride to that, in that she's doing that, or just that she's fulfilling her dreams? I mean, that must be kind of cool that she's teaching at the exact same school she went to and that you taught at.
It is really special because we devoted a lot of years to that community, and we made a lot of friends there. A lot of parents that we made friends with, student teachers, other teachers. So, and I, working with kids it's a good life. I think it's hard, and you got to learn to live within your means and that kind of thing. But yeah, I think Delaney she's much more like her mom as far as a teacher. She's a grade level teacher, so she's really into teaching kids how to read. And
so that's second grade, right?
Second grade, right. So it's a little different discipline than teaching the arts. But for both of my younger kids, they both graduated in December, and they both found jobs within a month in their field of study. And so I think as a parent, you're thrilled by that because and they both seem to be happy with what they started with. And then my older daughter is a musician, so they're all musical.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
As long as they're happy,
Yeah.
you know. As long as they can take care of themselves and they're happy. I think that's, what was it they used to get mad at me? I'd say, I just want you to be a capable, happy person as an adult, you know. So they got really sick of hearing me say that, you know, because it was probably
They
related
love it.
to something.
You know they still love it deep down.
It's
they
like,
love
you
that
know, it's probably
sort of
related
thing.
to something like, you know, be more careful when you park the car or something
yeah,
like
yeah.
that. You know,
Yeah.
that would be the capable part, you know.
Yeah.
And if you don't have to pay for the dent that you make in it, then that makes you happy. That'd be the happy part.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
And I'm curious now. So, I mean, you're still creating art. You're still creating music. For you, is there, you know, can you compartmentalize your expression? Like, is it, you know, do you have an idea one day where it's like, oh, this would be great for a song, or oh, this would be a great painting, or I found this item here that I can use in a piece, or does it start from more of a thought or an idea, then you decide, oh, I want to push this into the song channel, I want to push this into the art channel? How do you even begin with ideas like that?
Well, you know, the songs and the artwork, they can happen in different ways. You know, I mean, you can, you know, a song, sometimes I'll start with something on the guitar that I like, and then words will start forming themselves around that. But sometimes I might start with just a phrase that I like. I think to write songs with good lyrics, you have to really love words. So, you know, you'll find a little phrase that you like, and that might be a starting point. And then in the art, it might be an object, because I'm using a lot of found objects. You know, it might be a piece that gives you some kind of feeling about what it represents, you know, even if it's abstract. And that will just kind of lend itself to adding more to it. I think really with, you know, and I think songs are the same way. With like a picture, you start a picture, and then you really have to listen to that image, what it needs. It will tell you what it needs by looking at it. And I think with a song, it's kind of the same way. You know, you'll play through the thing and sing the thing and read the thing, and you know, you'll either say, I really like this thing that's happening with this verse or this phrase, and so I'll build around that. Or it might just, it kind of helps determine what needs to happen next.
Can you be inspired to either write a song or do an art piece in the same day? I mean, like, how does your brain work that way, I guess, you know, in terms of like deciding how you're going to express yourself?
Sometimes it's just a practical thing, you know.
Yeah.
When all the paint's wet, then what do? You know, I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes I have to say to myself, you know, and I have a bad habit of talking to myself. I was an only child for 10 years, so.
Yeah.
But sometimes I'll be saying to myself, you have to leave this room and not come back for at least an hour, because you want to keep messing with things, and when they're wet, you're going to mess something up. You know, you need to just walk away from it. So a lot of times when that happens, then I go to the music.
Okay.
I rehearse, or I might, you know, be working on something. I have to admit, with the art, I have not written as much. But in a way, that's good, though, too, because I think then I'm only picking the very strongest ideas to work on.
Yeah.
You know.
Because I could see, because you did, you know, for like your horse series, you know, and I could see that bringing up especially memories in Texas or something that all of a sudden could inspire, you know, a song either from your past or just the beauty of the horse itself,
Right.
you know.
Well, go ahead, Brent.
I was gonna say, don't you have like 400 and some odd horses in your car?
Yeah.
That's a lot to.
I do, I do, and I think there's something about the horse thing, you know, with that, you know, it's like kind of because I'll think, oh yeah, I'd like to have a Jaguar or something like that, and then I'll go, you can't wear a cowboy hat in a Jaguar, but you can wear a cowboy hat in a Mustang.
Yeah,
because it's a horse.
yeah.
But funny thing about the horse is that I was mixing paint to paint some frames, and I had mistakenly used the brush I was going to paint the frames with to mix the paint, which means that, and I had altered the paint, it was like black with a little red and a little brown in it, and I realized that if I took that brush and started painting the frames, I was going to get streaks of all the different colors. So I had a fully loaded brush, and I hate wasting paint, so I grabbed a scrap of wood and just kind of swooshed on it to get that paint off of it and not waste it. And then I proceeded to paint the frames, and when I got done, I picked up that piece of wood and I said, oh, it's a horse. So it was on a little thin piece of plywood, pretty plywood. So I took a scraper and scraped the details on it, and then I walked around irritating my daughters for 2 days, calling it my horse, And I think you do this with music too, but especially with the art, you'll do something like that, and then you just fall in love with it, and then you're just talking about it. Just talking about it is basically just kind of how you're working your way through what is it going to be. So I was doing the 32 series, and so I thought, well, this piece, and I used this horse in a piece, and I thought, well, there's not a 32 in there. So I thought, well, I'll call the horse. At first, I'd called him Lucky, because I thought it was, lucky that I'd created him, And so then I called him Lucky 32. And so the 32 kind of became a year then, and he became the fastest racehorse of 32. And then I had another paintbrush full of paint a few weeks later, and I grabbed a scrap of wood that had a rusty nail in it, and I painted a guy's face with a fedora, and the nail was like a cigar.
Oh, wow.
And so that became this character that has really, really made a lot of the things happen. And the first piece I used it in was a 32 piece, and I named it Sir Anthony's 32 Pretensions of a Sporting Life.
Holy shit.
And the horse was in that too, And so it became like, okay, well, Lucky must belong to this guy. And then I started thinking, why did you call him Sir Anthony? It's like kind of like a nobility name or something. And I thought, well, maybe it's like, maybe before that he was like a minor gangster or something like that, Goomba guy, and so he's trying to hide from that life by taking this other name. And so then I thought, well, what would his name have been, back? So I decided that when he was a gangster, that his name would be Tony Staccato, for the rat-a-tat-tat sound of his Thompson submachine gun, But being a pacifist, I'm always like trying to reconcile this with it. So I was thinking, well, maybe he's like, just scares the hell out of everybody, but he never really hits anybody. He's a bad shot or something, But so I have paintings of. I've got a Tony Staccato painting that's a ghost of Tony Staccato painting, and then I've got one where he's sitting behind a desk with kind of two henchmen behind him and a very strange woman to his side, and that one's called Tony Wants to See You. And it's like that intimidating moment where you're sat down in front of the boss, and are you going to even survive the day, And
That almost sounds like a representation of yourself in a sense. Like, because you do have this persona of like being this like, Brian
Tony
and
Staccato?
Yeah. Oh, we know.
Are you or were you ever Tony Staccato?
We know who you are as far as like we've had interactions with you for the past few years, so it's like we know you're this friendly human being. But like Matt was saying, when you first got, he's like, I don't know if I should be intimidated or if I, it's like. So you are
Well,
Tony.
I think it's interesting. I think a lot of artists, whether they mean to or not, a lot of what they're doing is an extension of themselves.
Yeah, you kind
Even
of
if they
can't
think
get
they're
around that.
Painting a character that's just out there, whatever. There's something probably in you can relate to.
Yeah, and it's much more interesting to imagine being from Italy or something like that,
Yeah.
So I actually, I actually have another thing, which was Antonio. Antonio Stacasio is the name that I gave to this character before he becomes corrupted. So he starts out in Italy, pretty much loves horses.
Wow.
The Godfather 2 of your painting?
Yeah.
Like that?
So I have a couple paintings where it's
Yeah.
Antonio.
Yeah.
And I had this weird, a lot of what happens with these kind of multimedia pieces is you have fragments and you wait until you find a home for them. What will this go with? Or I should do this one and include this fragment in it. And I had another scrap that I painted on, and I painted a baby sitting next to a table, and there was a little scrap of something that was kind of white that was like the drawer of the little table. And in trying to get that to really show up, because it was kind of a little sketch thing, and so I painted, and babies are hard to paint, I end up being like one of these medieval painters where the babies all have, like little adult faces, So anyway, the baby ends up, I was getting it, pretty rounded and baby looking like, but it still just wasn't really totally working. So I thought, this is like baby Antonio. So I'm going to put a mustache on the baby. So I put a little mustache on the baby,
Yeah, man.
And then I found an old dice and kind of cut it at an angle and stuck it on there, so it's like even as a baby he's starting to be corrupted by gambling.
He loves craps. It is.
But later, and this is
craps.
probably 5 inches by 8 inches, and later I incorporated it into this other piece, about Antonio, and it's called The Immigrant. And I was really struck by, I was working on that at the same time that immigrants became a really big part of the news, And of course, this is an immigrant who would have immigrated, in the early 20th century or something like that. But it just seemed interesting to me, but mostly I was really thrilled that painting has baby Antonio.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting. You're touching on something with art that is something that's not immediately obvious to me. I don't think about too much, but like with music, you a lot of times with Springsteen, he develops these stories about characters, and they come up again in different songs, and you find out more about these characters and stuff. But I think with art, it's not as immediately obvious, and with our music, I've done the same thing about certain characters kind of come back, and whether I call them out by name or not, it's just a thing. But with art, it's like I've never really thought about it that way, where you've kind of developed characters and you're sort of telling their story through these images of them, whether it's like them as a baby or
And it's really fun when it's spontaneous like that too.
That's cool.
But yeah, I think that it's and I sense that from your songs too. Some of the characters, and they kind of develop themselves. I mean, it's not like you have a pre-plan of how this is going to turn out.
Definitely not. Yeah. But it's kind of fun when it's like, because I used to write songs just about like my exact experience, and like what I know about, but it's really fun when you get into the whole like, I'm gonna create these characters in these situations that they might be in, and that's really fun to do. That's like it, and it's a little less personal, but it's just as honest. It's
very creative though.
Yeah, and it's fun.
Because then once that character's there, then it's kind of like you live with it for a while, and then it's all of a sudden it's kind of like, that's something that character would do.
Right. Yeah, how would that person deal with life, whatever situation is thrown at them? And it's like, That's a really unique way to think about the world, and
And I think it's an interesting thing how these stories happen, because you haven't planned it out, and it just kind of things spring up, and yet some of those things are still part of your experience. Like I did one that was with this guy, and he was older, and it was kind of like the horse had died, and so it's the tragic later years of Sir Anthony Stock, and so you're, I think that you tend to think about, at that point you start thinking about older people that you've known, or maybe even yourself. In that one, not so much that, but just like, that you've known, that maybe parts of their life were somewhat of a disaster or something, or was a downer. And then that creeps into this character, You have a character that's maybe kind of, at this point, sad, at another point, intimidating, at another point, maybe searching, for something. So you're able to kind of pull those things into the character. And I always find that just to be, kind of the carrot. I mean, it's the amazing thing is that you started out with nothing, and then all of a sudden these characters exist. This song exists, this art piece exists. And so I think that, to me, that's the most exciting part, is that, something exists that just wasn't there. I mean, when you write a song, there's that song, and it takes, 2 minutes and 30 seconds or whatever, and has this set of words in it, and maybe these characters and all that. And once it's there, it's there. It's, it's not like an idea in your head anymore. It's an actual thing that people have experienced, and so then you've created something real out of, thin air, basically.
It's a really wild thing to think about it like that. When you kind of step back and look at it, like, wow, I made that thing.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of crazy,
Yeah, and I think
especially the fact that you get to perform it and stuff, and like,
we're lucky to get to participate in that. I think
you're
because
definitely
it's
right.
joyful,
Yeah.
and it's not boring.
Yeah.
I mean, even if part of the story's boring, that can be part of. That can be, well, this person acted this way because they're bored. Which is something that we've all done. We've all done something either brilliantly creative that's pulled us out of something, or stupid that didn't work out very well. But it was because we were bored and we were just kind of doodling in the margins, so to speak.
Yeah.
So.
Wow.
Well, thanks, Rick.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Hours with you. I think we should have a round two in the future.
Yeah, definitely.
For sure.
I'd agree
Have it
with
back
that.
on the
Appreciate
show.
you coming on. So Artworks, Rick Steinberg. Then it's Stonehouse is the
Stonehouse
is your project, a music project.
Facebook page for Stonehouse.
Right.
Yes.
And for the Artworks, do you have that too on Facebook?
Yes, that one is Rick Steinberg Artworks.
Right.
Is the Facebook page.
Seems like the places you're playing are pretty much Bangers, Garage Mahal.
Yes, those are the most regular places.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go check them out.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Thanks, Rick.
Thanks, Rick.
Good stuff.
Appreciate it.
It's fun.